The Wild Geese by Wendell Berry. Horseback on Sunday morning, harvest over, we taste persimmon and wild grape, sharp, sweet of summer's end. In time's maze over fall fields, we name names that went west from here, names that rest on graves. We open a persimmon seed to find the tree that stands in promise, pale in the seed's marrow. Geese appear high over us, pass, and the sky closes. Abandon, as in love or sleep, holds them to their way. Clear in the ancient faith. What we need is here. And we pray not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and in eye clear. What we need is here. I invite you now to join me in prayer, and I begin with the people of Ukraine. Today, they are continuing to suffer from ongoing military aggression, and today, Ukrainians are also trying to celebrate this, their 34th Independence Day, today. Right now, churches all over the world are in prayer for Ukraine. We join in this global prayer, asking for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine and in all war-torn lands, including Gaza, Haiti, Sudan, that all wars will come to a peaceful end, and that light will overcome the shadows of violence and death. God of many understandings, may it be so. Last week, you may have seen that a Catholic cardinal named Matteo Zuppi, head of the Italian Bishops' Conference, led a 7-hour prayer vigil in which the names of each and every child who has died in the conflict between Israel and Hamas from October 7th, 2023 through July 25th, 2025 were read aloud. 16 Israeli children and 12,211 Palestinian children were named. The document listing these children was 469 pages long. And so in addition to the children, as well as the women and men who have already died, there are also those who are suffering and dying from the famine in Gaza. May the hardened hearts of those who keep people from receiving food and water that they truly need, may those hearts be softened. God of our many understandings, may it be so. This morning, Calvary Church downtown offered their monthly foot clinic. Doctors take turns offering medical care. Others distribute toiletries, clothes, and a breakfast bag. And we give thanks today for all communities of faith who care for the least of these in our many communities. And we ask how we can be of help now to those who are less fortunate than we are. God of our many understandings, may it be so. In our own worlds, including our churches, our families, our friends, and those who feel like our enemies, let us remember how isolation brings death, but community brings life. May we reach out to those who are isolated in any way. When we feel cut off from life, in suffering or pain, in loss and grief, may we ask for and receive the help we truly need. God of our many understandings, may it be so. And today we also remember all those who have died this past week, especially those closest to us, including Barbara, as well as those who have died in the more distant past. We still love them, even though we see them no longer. May their souls and the souls of all the departed rest in peace. God of our many understandings, may it be so.
We now take an offering that allows us to exercise the all-important generosity of spirit and to support this church and its many ministries. Donations may be made by scanning the QR code in your order service, texting, or on the website churchoftheriver.org. The gifts of the congregation will now be most gratefully given and received.
morning. My name is Tom Momberg, and I am an Episcopal priest. But today, someone said to me earlier, I'm a Episcopal uni or uni-Episcopal? I'm not sure. I want to ask you a question since we've started with questions already today. Have you ever sent an email by accident? This morning, as I listened to Jessica, I thought, oh my God, I sent her my sermon by accident. And then I remembered this wonderful spiritual guide, a Catholic nun in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who used to listen to me tell stories like that. And she would always say, not by accident, Tom, not by accident. So we'll see how much accident there is in what I've prepared to share with you today. And you may already know this, but I love poetry. And I love questions. And let me tell you why. Poet Mary Oliver wrote, as we heard Jessica mention, as we heard read just a moment ago, we live with mysteries too marvelous to be understood. One way to think about mysteries is with questions. Questions of marvelous mysteries are questions about life, about God, about God's creation, including us. Questions about us. I'll have more to say about God later on, but for now, I want to stay with poetry for a little while and questions. I wonder, do you know these lines? Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Like locked rooms, and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given to you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then, gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answers. That's Rainer Maria Rilke from Letters to a Young Poet. Well, I try to live and love my questions, especially the ones about mystery. My love for poetry was reignited when my wife, Eileen, introduced me to the poetry of Mary Oliver. Long before we were married, by the way. When she began reading poetry to me, my life changed. The first poem she shared with me is probably Mary Oliver's most famous. It's called Wild Geese, like the other poem that another poet read. Now, I'm guessing some of you know this poem. It begins, "You do not have to be good." One devotee of Mary Oliver says she has an amazing way of using just a few words about things as simple as dirt to express meaningful, challenging truths. Soon after meeting Mary Oliver in poetry, I began to dive into the work of a Quaker teacher and writer named Parker Palmer. That's when my love of questions became so juicy, they became my jam. Parker and his disciples at the Center for Courage and Renewal taught me how the very best questions are honest, open ones. You know, open, honest questions have answers we cannot really, truly, possibly know when we ask them, when we first love them and live them. Now, I'm not talking about binary yes, no either or questions like, are you a Republican or a Democrat? I'm talking about questions about life, about the universe, answers to which are not yet revealed. Mary Oliver has a few more words in the first poem we heard today that reinforce the need to resist the easier questions. Let me keep my distance, always, she says, from those who think they have the answers. The operative word there is think. And so honest, open, curious questions can easily become lifelong questions. Here's one I just came across. It won't leave me alone. It's from Laurie Patton, the president of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Here it is. What is the story you are working on that doesn't have an ending yet? What is the story that you are working on that doesn't have an ending yet? Now, another poet, David White, offers us prose wisdom about our questions and our stories. He says, one of the most beautifully disturbing questions we can ask is whether a story we tell about ourselves is actually true. It can be quite disorienting to find that a story we have relied on is not only not true, it actually never was true. Not now. Not ever, he says. Stories we tell about ourselves are not the only ones we may need to re-examine. There are stories we tell about our communities, our families, our cities, our country. Any story may need to stand some serious scrutiny. For example, the statement, and I've heard this a lot lately, "That's not who we are," may need to be held up to the light of truth with a question. Who are we now? Now, if you weren't here last Sunday morning, I wasn't, but I invite you to watch Reverend Lynn's sermon on Facebook Live. She talked about covenant, what it is and what it will need to be for you now as a community. This is about the story you will be working on together, the story I believe you are now being invited to tell yourselves about yourselves, and then to tell others. I have come to believe that the story I'm still working on is primarily a story of confession. As a person and a priest, I keep learning as one congregational conflict resolution consultant I worked with put it years ago. I keep learning how to clean my side of the street. I'm still learning, unlearning, and relearning. Confession is indeed good for the soul. And so, my name is Tom, and I'm a person in recovery. I'm recovering from several chronic illnesses, including asthma and alcoholism. By the grace of God and with the help of my medical team, I'm breathing well most of the time these days. And by the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been living into continuous sobriety for 33 years and 358 days. One day at And I'm grateful to John, my very first AA sponsor, for asking me, Tom, do you have a drinking problem? They say in AA that recovery is all about progress, not perfection. I'm no longer a practicing alcoholic. I do try, imperfectly, to practice the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous in all my affairs, in all parts of my life. I fail from time to time. But practice, like progress, does not make perfect. Practice, one theologian says, practice makes pilgrims. I love being a practicing pilgrim in progress, a lifelong learner. Since I retired 11 years ago, I now worship in Christian and other sacred spaces like Church of the River. Sometimes I worship in that most beloved church of all time. Maybe you've heard of it. St. Mattress on the Springs. Wherever I go, I try to follow Jesus. I try to emulate Jesus' spiritual teachings, his way of life, his way of love. For me, Jesus is still the way, and yet for me, Jesus is not the only way to God. I'll say more about God soon, I promise, very soon. But I'm also in recovery in other ways. I'm a recovering racist, sexist, and homophobe. I'll always live with asthma, alcoholism, and all my isms. I'll never be fully recovered, past tense, from them. I'll keep working on all my isms because I'm still called to do that work as long as I walk this earth. Now, there are other isms, other opportunities for spiritual growth, you might say. You've heard of fundamentalism. Here's a new one for you, perhaps. Hemispherism. You know what I mean. In this country, up north is better than down south. In this world, the Western world is better than the East. And the right brain is better than the left. Pick one. That's brains, not politics. Speaking of politics, a lot is being written and said these days about this ism, Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is more than a fringe ideology now. It's a mainstream force shaping and misshaping our national identity, public policy, and religious discourse. Christian nationalism is more about nationalism than anything else. And Christian nationalism is also more about theocracy, theo meaning God, than democracy. In essence, it teaches that a God-called Christian is our country's real president, ruler, and king. Reverend Joshua Narcisse, who works at Church Health, recently wrote, and I quote, "Recent events have shown how our religious and political arcs have actually been bending for decades, not toward justice, but toward an American Christianity that does not follow a Christ concerned about the least of these, but rather is a nationalism both idolatrous and soulless." Close quotes. I'm a patriot. To be patriotic means to love your country, including those times of trial when we're having a great big lovers' quarrel. To be a nationalist, however, can easily lead to embracing theocracy and autocracy, which leads to believing in a national supremacy blessed by a false God. And so I wonder, where is God, Jesus, or love in all of that? Well, I want to name 3 things that have helped me understand what I did not know about how I can best live my life of recovery. Here they are. Number 1, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Number 2, a 75-year-old book, a classic I read for the first time a few years ago. And number 3, a class I just finished attending. As of August 24th, 2025, here's what I know. I still don't know what I don't know. And I really don't know what I often think I know. That's not because I'm stupid or slow or totally ignorant or ill-informed. That's because, and here's the not by accident moment again, that's because I am not God. Well, I've said a good bit about AA. I want to tell you now about the book written three quarters of a century ago and about its author. You may know it. Jesus and the Disinherited was published in 1950 by a black theologian named Howard Thurman. In that book, Thurman wrote about how Christianity, including his own understanding of it, had lost its way. 15 years earlier, in 1935, Howard Thurman's understanding of Christianity had been transformed when he made a pilgrimage to India. There, Thurman, a black man, was challenged by his host, a man of color who practiced Hinduism. Here's what his host said to him. More than 300 years ago, your forebears were taken from Africa and enslaved. People who dealt in the slave trade were Christians. One of your famous hymn writers, Sir John Newton, made his money from the sale of slaves to the New World. John Newton also wrote the song, Amazing Grace. Howard Thurman's Hindu host continued. The men who bought slaves were Christians. Christian ministers, quoting the Christian apostle Paul, gave the sanction of religion to the system of slavery. Some 70 years ago or so ago, you were freed by Abraham Lincoln, a man who wasn't a professing Christian, but was rather the spearhead of a certain political, social, and economic force, the significance of which Lincoln himself did not fully understand. Since then, you have lived in a so-called Christian nation in which you are segregated, lynched, and burned. Even in the church, there is segregation. One of my students, the Hindu man said, who went to your country, sent me a story about a Christian church in which the regular Sunday worship was interrupted. So, people could join a mob against one of your fellows. When the mob caught and killed him, they resumed their worship of their Christian God. Here's how he ended. I am a Hindu. I do not understand. You are in my country standing deep within the Christian faith and tradition, and I do not wish to seem rude to you. But, sir, I think you are a traitor to all the darker peoples of the earth. I am wondering what you, an intelligent man, can say in defense of your position. That was 1935. And so I wonder, how did Howard Thurman, a great theologian, not even know what he didn't know about Christianity? How he said this about his life-changing experience. The masses of men, women, and children live with their backs constantly against the wall. They are the poor, the disinherited, the dispossessed. What does my Christianity say to them? The answer is perhaps the most important religious quest of modern life. Sisters and brothers, Howard Thurman's conclusion was that Christianity needed to be the religion of Jesus, not someone's or some church's religion about their Jesus. You hear that distinction? I'm told Unitarians do not have a sacred text or a single leader that you agree is authoritative. What you do have, Reverend Lynn has told you, is your commitment to one another. Even so, some of you, I suspect, all of us are human, but some of you may be tempted to fall into what I would call an Episcopalian trap. Here's a joke about that. For Protestant Christians, the source of all authority is the Bible. At least it used to be that way. For Catholics, it's still the Pope. For Episcopalians, if we're honest, the source of all authority is the previous priest. Perhaps a former Unitarian minister. Finally, the class I audited last week was called Christian Dialogue with World Religions. It was a Memphis Theological Seminary 4-day immersion experience in the Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist traditions. For me, an old pilgrim in progress, signing up for this class was taking a few more steps on my spiritual journey. You see, 40 years ago, I began to take my adult journey's first baby steps as a seminarian in New York City. Each incoming student was assigned a tutor. Mine was the first non-Jew to receive a PhD at nearby Jewish Theological Seminary. Vesta was her name, and she was my tutor because each incoming student was assigned one, and she was also seeking ordination in the Episcopal Church, like me. And so she was both my tutor and a fellow pilgrim, accompanying me during that first wonderful, terrible year of my 3-year journey of spiritual formation. Early on, Vesta asked me this question. Tell me, Tom, is Jesus the only way? The answer came to me about a year later in a casual remark made by a professor. He said, "For me, Jesus is the way." And I thought, okay, that helps me. But more recently, another book by another professor that I read during this 4-day class helped me with this perspective. Jesus is the way that embraces all ways. Jesus is the way that embraces all ways. And that broader perspective comes from Reverend Dr. Barbara Brown Taylor, a well-known preacher and teacher, and in her latest book, Holy Envy, subtitle Finding God in the Faith of Others, she writes about her experience as a college professor after years of church work. One of the most beautiful things about her book is how Professor Taylor keeps on asking her students honest, open, better, more beautiful questions, as any good teacher does. She carefully shapes her questions, and as the great poet Rainer Maria Rilke invites us to do, I believe Barbara Brown Taylor really loves and lives her questions. And here are some of them. Now, the first one is very close to what Jessica just asked you to think about. Like I said, I must have sent her my sermon. No, she came up with that by herself with God's help. But here it is. What do you mean when you say God? That's her, Barbara Brown Taylor's way of shaping that quote. What do you mean when you say God? Here's another one. When we die, is that it? Love the brevity of that. How do you change a mind that knows nothing about its own shadows? What do religious strangers reveal to me and you about God? Barbara Brown Taylor's questions help me with some of my own. What if my God is actually not my God? When it comes to God, how do I not even know what I don't know after all these years? My goodness. And my big, beautiful question these days, which is now one of my lifelong questions, is this. How is God our God? Our God, not my God. I first took steps toward answering that question when I heard this AA phrase, the God of my understanding. The God of my understanding. If that way of describing God is helpful to you, it's probably because you have come to see how your own understanding of God is different from the person sitting next to you. Or anyone, anywhere else. That's not only okay, it's good. In many 12-step gatherings, you'll hear how the God of someone's understanding can be found in the big book of AA. That book is God for some. Or it's in that very fellowship of fellow recovering people. I believe Reverend Lynn told you in her very first sermon that, quote, God is what happens when we show up in common purpose. Close quotes. Well, sisters and brothers, a common purpose is, well, common. It's communal, not individual. That means the God of my understanding is not quite enough. What if the God of my understanding is too small? Maybe we need what Reverend Gene Robinson, the first openly gay partnered man to become an Episcopal bishop over 20 years ago. He found a much bigger God, and the way he describes God is this: the God of our many understandings. Many. And so now I've progressed from the God of my understanding to the God of our many understandings, and even to the God of our many misunderstandings. They're there too. And always back to God, the God who is not me or you. To paraphrase Joni Mitchell, we really don't know God at all. And Mary Oliver's take, remember, we live with mysteries too marvelous to be understood. And so my big, beautiful question remains, how is God our God? I've come to believe as a practicing Christian that Jesus is not the only way for every human being who ever lived or ever will walk this planet. What I've also come to believe and to understand is that my recovery must include one last ism. Fascism. Simply put, fascism, as historian Heather Cox Richardson puts it, is a system based on the idea that some people are better than others. A fascist thinks they'll always be better than other people, including all kinds or all groups of people. And so my name is still Tom, and to be rigorously honest, I need to confess this to you. I'm a recovering fascist. To paraphrase the prophet Pogo, that winsome character in a comic strip my father always read, I have met the enemy, and he, she, they is me. Barbara Brown Taylor comes to the rescue again, and I quote, "The only clear line I draw these days is this. When my religion tries to come between me and my neighbor, I will choose my neighbor." That self-canceling feature of my religion is one of the things I like best about it. Jesus never commanded me to love my religion. So there was Howard, a black man, who learned by listening to a Hindu. And there is Barbara, a white woman, teaching while learning from her students. If it's God you want, she says, look for the light and not the diamond. There are so many facets in the diamond, and yet the light is not any of them. Their beauty lies in their ability to reflect what is beyond them. No religion, including yours, no religion, she says, is the entire ocean. Well, finally, and I do mean finally, there's us. I've come to believe and appreciate how no religion, no text, no teacher, no river, even the mighty Mississippi, is life's entire ocean. I believe we need more images, more expressions, more understandings of the holy and the human. So we can be, as Reverend Dr. King put it, building beloved community. I also believe poet Wendell Berry is right when he says at the end of that poem I read, all we need is here. All you need to be Church of the River now is here. Well, that's the story I'm still working on, and I'm sticking to it. So I wonder, what's your story these days?
Tradition where I come from, we say, preach. Thank you, Reverend Tom, for your words today. Please join us for our final hymn, number 159, This Is My Song. Rise and body or spirit as you're able.
From
bless you, heal you, strengthen you, encourage you, and give you the love and the justice you need to share. And may that God remain with us and those we love this day and forevermore.